So we want to talk about how you can use the definition of a literary device to help you fully unpack the possibilities of its meaning. So we're talking about looking on the level of the word and unpacking the meaning of a phrase or a device in a text. And as an example, we're going to use Emily Dickinson's poem that begins with the line, "Hope is the thing with feathers." Dickinson wrote this in 1861. So the first thing we want to do is use the definition of the term. So a metaphor is a comparison between a thing the poet wants to explain to us, which we call the tenor, and the thing the poet uses to help us understand that tenor. So the tenor of this poem, the thing that Dickinson is trying to teach us about, is hope. And the vehicle she's using is a bird. Oh, wait, how do you know that's a bird, Jim? She says feathers. Well, feathers are a classic use of a device that we call synecdoche, where a part of something is used to represent the whole. In this case, the feathers, by the way, the part most associated with flight, are a synecdoche for the bird as a whole. So we've actually got a metaphor that's using synecdoche that opens up all sorts of possibilities for writing about it. Now, the important thing to do is once we've looked at a metaphor and we've identified what the tenor and what the vehicle is, the next thing we need to do is we need to shape a guiding question for ourselves. We need to ask a question. And I urge students to write these questions down, not in your actual post or your answer, although I do ask you to do that in your discussion thread, but you won't do that in a formal paper. It's the answer that will be in a formal paper. But in this writing exercise, I do ask you to write down the question. So here for me, the question is, how does Dickinson use this metaphor comparing hope to a bird to comment on human agency in 1861? Well, 1861 is the opening of the Civil War. And most people don't realize Dickinson's actually a war poet. But putting that aside, if we say hope is like a bird, what are we saying about hope? Well, we can start unpacking the connotations. We can ask ourselves, what are the connotations of talking about hope as a bird? And one thing is flight, which we associate with freedom and feathers. But the other thing is, birds are also fragile and endangered and can be prey. They also are wild, or most of the ones Dickinson's talking about. Of course, are domesticated birds, but she's referring to wild birds. So once we start writing down the connotations, wow, there's lots of possibilities here. Now we need to sort of craft a sentence or two or three that somehow works this out for us. So now comes the hard part. We have to think about these ideas and scratch out some sentences that walk a reader step by step through what's the tenor, what's the vehicle, how is Dickinson using it, how are these connotations of flight and freedom and fragility and endangerment, how do they all play out? And after a good chunk of time thinking, this doesn't happen magically, good chunk of time thinking and crafting, maybe we get something like this, where we say that we use a subordinate clause structure, although contrasted with another idea, to lay out this tension in Dickinson's metaphor. And we say something like, although Dickinson's metaphoric comparison of the tenor, hope, to the vehicle, a bird, probably should be a comma before and after hope to set it off, has positive connotations such as freedom and flight, we can also read this metaphor as suggesting negative connotations of vulnerability and fragility. If hope is the central idea of human agency, perhaps even the engine of human agency, then Dickinson seems to be suggesting that agency is both exhilarating and fragile, liberating but easily destroyed. Now, I'm not saying that's a definitive reading of this line. What I'm saying is it's an interesting reading because it breaks down word by word the structure of this metaphor and fleshes out for us the connotative, the associative possibilities. So that's all I'm asking you to do. I just want you to do what I just did after 30 years of studying literature. Of course, I don't expect you to be able to jump from the notes I just showed you over here to a sentence like this, your first time out. Eventually, I think by the end of the semester, you'll be writing cool stuff like this. But for now, I just want you to take your first crack at it. And the technique we use here, using the definition of a term, in this case metaphor, to help us unpack the term and what an author's doing with that term, is what got the ball rolling. See you in Canvas.